So this is a quick overview of the Kanban board, and I'm going to explain the 5 different columns that I'm using. You can have any number of columns that you want. You can name the columns different things, but this is working well for me right now so far. And I'll start off with the left-hand side and the middle column. So on the very left, I've got the column stories. Really what I'm placing in there are the major projects that I have to focus. So I'm teaching 3 courses at different levels of university. Some of them are first-year courses, some of them are 4th year. And the descriptions underneath the names of the courses, I follow a framework that just helps me make sure that I'm designing things towards the right level of skill. And if you're interested in that, you can look up what's called Bloom's taxonomy. The very last project I'm working on is up on GitHub. It's called SimChop. It is a real-time volumetric particle system for the Unity game engine. Now that's ongoing. It's still in beta. Almost worked out all of the bugs before we're going to release a full version. The second column is to do, and it's focusing on the tasks and describing the tasks that I could get done in maybe 1 day, 2 days. There's no real limit to this, but I limit it myself to maybe about a week ahead, and that's it. Once I decide what I would like to focus on for the day, usually at the beginning of each day, or maybe at the end of the previous day, then I move those tasks into the column that's labeled in progress. And I limit this to maybe about 4 things. And when I'm finished at the end of the day, I take a look at what's left and I ask myself, is this a description of a task that really is going to take me about 1 day? So after I've worked on it for a little while, I get a better idea of how I might refine that. And I might take that task, break it down into smaller pieces, and then I place one of them and leave it in the in progress column, and I'll place the remaining tasks back in the to-do column. So for the second half of my Kanban board, after I'm finished with something in progress, then I move it into a column that I label as quality assurance. But most people that are doing software development, they probably call this column testing or maybe debugging or something like that. So for myself, I write a lot of documents for the majority of my courses that I'm teaching, and that means I'm going to have to do things like spell check and deal with grammar issues, or maybe thinking about the complexity of what I'm writing, maybe simplify it a little bit to make it easier to read. I'd also be thinking about the layout of the documents. So these kind of things I would do for quality assurance for documents. But I'm also doing the SimChop, and that project, I have to do a lot of debugging. So I'm discovering that debugging for software development really does take quite a long time, and you have to make sure that you're giving yourself, as part of managing your time, realizing that it's going to take maybe twice the amount of time it took you to actually write the code to then fix any of the issues with it. Because it's not just the errors in the statements of the code, it's also the logical thinking behind it. Maybe the mathematics calculations that you're doing, you might need to go back and scrutinize to make sure that what you're trying to calculate is actually what you need. And the way that things are these days, you've got all these open source projects out there and they're ready to just be grabbed by anybody. And if something like SimChop that I'm making is in beta, then I guess I just have to be comfortable with having stuff that's not perfect yet. And as I fix it, I continue to post new releases of that project. So eventually it gets there. This morning I figured out the calculations for the volume, and there's a theorem in mathematics for how closely you can pack spheres together, and it was a lot of fun to fix that. Once you're finished with quality assurance and you know things are working correctly, you've double checked everything, you know you're done, you move it into the last column, it's done. So I call this column sprint ends, which is just following Same kind of naming schemes as Scrum, Agile, but I'm not really using it for anything beyond just a column where I know things are done. Now I might add some higher level descriptions here. Maybe if I'm focusing on providing some kind of feature in my code that requires it to be broken down into these smaller tasks, and I can think about it like a goal that I'm trying to reach towards, and I might categorize things in this column as I'm moving the smaller tasks and place them underneath that category. This way I know when I have that feature and its group of tasks completed, I can say, yes, check it off, it is actually done, and I'm focusing on things that I can measure, that I know are going to be done, and not just doing work where I think I'm making progress and it's not described properly, or it's described in a way that's ambiguous. I don't really know when it's done. So it can really help to just work with a Kanban board, keep all your work organized. You have it visual, you look at it in one glance, and you know where you're at with your project, with your tasks. You're keeping track of how much time it takes you when you're completed them. You write that time down on each little task, and then you can analyze how quickly you're doing your work. You can start to experiment on maybe doing things in a faster way. So this is another great advantage of managing your work like this, using a Kanban board and thinking through how you might fit that in with other project management methodologies or philosophies. So some of the higher level scope of where I might be placing this in context would be with DevOps principles or agile project management, these kind of things.